My mother had 3 children. A boy, a girl and the devil. I grew up somewhere too rural to even be called charming anymore. My mother fled there from my little brother's father when she got pregnant. None of us kids were fathered by the same person, and I for one never met the man she had me with. Her 3rd baby was born in a crummy trailer parked in the middle of nowhere with nothing but dirt and dust around. I don't know how she made it through the birth with no one but 2 frightened children to assist her. My big brother says I was too little, but I swear I can remember hearing her scream to this day. Benjamin is my half brother, but it's not like that ever made me see him in a different light. He's my big brother and we've always been close. Ben and I are 5 years apart. I don't know how old we were exactly when our mom died, but we still live in that trailer of hers. It's just standing somewhere else now. For a long time, I didn't know where our younger sibling was, either. Neither my brother nor I were keen on finding out. I guess we'd assumed his father had collected him after mom had left him in the woods and ran off with us. We thought we'd never see him again. It's been over 15 years since it happened. We hadn't expected him to ever come back to us. Yesterday night, Ben and I were sitting in the trailer going through my material together. I was preparing for the job interview I had scheduled for the following morning and very much stressing out over it. Ben had to remind me not to pull on the hairs on my arm every few seconds. It's what I do when I'm nervous. If we had the time, I'd make you get your arms waxed. He threatened me. It was then that we heard the first scream. It came from outside, somewhere behind the tree line. I winced at the sound. It was high-pitched and loud. I think if someone had been to skin a live animal it wouldn't have sounded any different. Ben wasn't as fazed as me. He just shrugged and told me it was probably a fox in heat. You've heard them screech before. Always spooked you, he told me. They shouldn't be around until January though, should they? I asked. What do I know? Maybe this one's early. Who cares? It's nothing. Keep reading. I grumbled a little, but looked down at my papers again. Until the next scream followed. I jerked my head up, and more determined this time. I said, "That is not a fox." Ben sighed deeply. "You want me to take a look?" I nodded and he grabbed his shotgun and opened the flimsy trailer door. It was dark outside. He didn't seem to need a flashlight though. My brother is a big guy, over 6 foot tall and very heavy. We don't talk about how he makes money, but I suspect he and his buddies moonshine and sell it under the table. I try not to think of how risky that is for him and his customers. I hope they are at least careful and that the stuff they brew doesn't make people who drink it go blind or anything. There's not much I can do to stop him, even though I'd really like to. I also think that his father looks out for him in secret and maybe gives him money from time to time. I've never met Ben's dad, and I don't want to. From what I've heard, he's no good, which is also why my big brother has always made an effort to keep me from ever encountering him. The one thing I'm sure of is that Ben will always be able to protect himself and me. People don't usually mess with him. I pulled my jacket from the back of my chair and put it on, trying to fight the cold air coming in through the open door. I sat and stared out into the darkness, waiting for Ben to return. Part of me expected to hear the sound of the shotgun being fired, or maybe another one of those screams. All remained silent though. Eventually, I stood up and walked over to peer outside, just as Ben came in. He almost ran right over me. I backed off, and he shut the door, putting the chain in place before sitting down. "There's nothing there," he told me in a calm voice. Still, I couldn't help but notice that he was keeping his shotgun close. A deep frown was creasing his forehead. Something wasn't right. I slowly sat back down and glanced up at him once or twice before finally focusing on preparing for the interview again. When the screeching started up again though, I knew I wouldn't be able to concentrate for much longer. I put my papers aside and got up, informing my brother that I was going to turn in for the night. He was barely listening. Instead, he kept staring at the door with that same frown on his face. He looked like some kind of statue and hardly appeared to register what I was saying. I was concerned, sure, but fatigue outweighed my worries and I disappeared behind the screen dividing the bedroom from the rest of the trailer to change clothes and lay down. Ben sleeps on a smaller mattress on the floor most of the time. He says it's important for me to take the actual bed because of how soft I am. At least he allowed me to give him the warmer blanket. I want him to get better rest and I know it helps. We have a bunch of cheap, thin blankets which I always place on top of one another to use for myself. I crawled underneath them and shut my eyes, trying to ignore the unnerving screams that kept coming from the woods in unsteady intervals. It was cold too, but the cold helped me fall asleep. I woke up because of a weight pressing down on my back. I was lying on my stomach with my face buried in the pillows. How I managed to even breathe was beyond me. Either way, someone was sitting on my back. They were heavy, but not heavy enough to be my brother. I knew if he'd been the one sitting on me, I wouldn't have survived to wake up in the first place. They were emanating a smell of manure and wet fur, strong enough for me to stifle a gag. I had this sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach, like I was in the process of realizing the danger I was in but not quite there yet. My heart was pounding in my chest and my mind was racing, but I didn't dare to move. I tried to keep my breathing steady despite me having broken into cold sweat already. I shut my eyes, attempting to relax my whole body, just so I'd stop trembling. Where was my brother? Where was Benjamin? That's the only thing I could think of. I knew whoever was on top of me had to have gotten past him to get to me. He was a light sleeper. He would never let anyone simply get inside like that. Bit by bit, the memories of the previous evening came trickling back in. What time was it? 1 or 2 in the morning maybe? I was just lying there, listening to this person's slow, raspy breaths, until they suddenly started vocalizing. It was like they were putting sound into their breathing, the result being a low, hoarse growl. I winced, gripping the bed sheets with the hand that was hidden beneath the blankets. The breathing hitched, and the weight on my back shifted. I pressed my eyes shut even tighter and tensed up, attempting to mask my shaking. Then, suddenly, I felt something graze my neck. It felt like bristles, mixed with hot, reeking air hitting my skin. "Hello, big sister." The voice came out mangled and distorted, like somebody playing a recording of somebody talking in reverse. I felt a sharp yank on my hair as he pulled me off the bed. I landed on the floor, the impact knocking the air out of me. I had played dead for long enough. I flung myself onto my back and kicked blindly into the air, my naked foot meeting with something warm and soft and furry. I had hit his belly. This didn't stop him for too long though, as I felt his hand in my hair again, gripping it and forcing me to sit up. Not knowing what else to do, I screamed my older brother's name. "Look at me," the creature above me hissed, right before slapping me in the face. "What do you want?" I whimpered. In the sparse light of the trailer, I couldn't quite see him. I did make out his silhouette though. Tall and broad, with something large and warped on top of his head. It didn't look right. I tried to remember his appearance from when he was only a baby, but my head was empty. Maybe I really had been too little. Instead of responding, he wrapped his arms around my chest and picked me up, dragging me out the door. I struggled and flailed around, trying to hold on to anything I could reach, but eventually giving up and letting him throw me into the dirt outside. "What do you want?" I repeated, tears in my eyes. "You left me to die," he growled. "What?" I whined. "That's what were we supposed to do? We were kids. I was a toddler." It was Mom who my voice broke off again. "Can you blame her? She couldn't have. You left me to die. You could have stopped her," he shouted. In the light of the full moon, I could finally see him clearly. He looked even worse than what I'd imagined. He was covered in thick, matted fur from his waist down, and he had the inverted legs of a goat. His arms ended in malformed hands that looked like his first and second as well as third and fourth fingers had grown into each other, 2 long black claws protruding from each of the pairs. I don't think he had any thumbs. His head was the least human thing about him. It looked almost entirely like that of a ram. How he managed to form any comprehensible words through that snout was beyond me. The silhouette of the 2 large horns on his head stood out against the sky. "I'm sorry," I yelled, getting on my hands and knees in an attempt to crawl away from him. My sides were burning with pain. I let out a cry of agony when he stomped down on my foot from above. "Please, I sobbed as I rolled over, shielding my head with my arms as he bent down to see eye to eye with me. His hands snaked their way past mine, and he wrapped his long, twisted fingers around my neck. I whimpered when his claws scraped my skin. Tears were running freely down my face as he began to choke me, his grip on my throat hard and painful. One's need to breathe is never stronger than when you're actually being deprived of air. I can't really describe the feeling of trying again and again to gasp for air. It's a burning kind of sensation, I believe. It gets harder and harder every time. I thought I was about to black out. Everything was already getting dark when suddenly, the pressure on my throat vanished. It just disappeared. Released from my little brother's hands, I slumped over and immediately began inhaling, coughing and gagging, while trying to steady my breathing almost like a fish on land. There was some kind of murmur filling my ears. When I could finally see clearly again, something large fell down next to me. It took me some time to register this, my grasp on reality as fragile as it was. I felt something warm and wet on my cheek. Then I felt it on my arms too. It was hard to make out at first, but judging from its smell and color, I could soon tell that it was blood. The next thing I realized was that it was everywhere. It didn't just stain my arms and face. It was on my clothes, on the ground below me, and even in my hair. I looked up to see Ben towering above me. There was no blood on him though. He pulled me up and wrapped his arms around me, gently stroking my back. "It's okay," he whispered. "He's dead. It's alright." I turned to look at the dead body lying in the dirt, but Ben reached up and placed his hand on the back of my head, carefully yet firmly keeping it in place. "Please don't look," he said softly. I took a deep, shaky breath. "Where were you after you fell asleep?" I went back outside to well, I'd thought it was him when we heard the screams. I had to deal with him somehow, and I didn't want to frighten you. In hindsight, I guess the only reason he announced himself like that was to lure me out, so he could. I don't know why he'd start with you. I'm just glad he couldn't finish it. I'm so sorry. I should have paid closer attention to you. I should have never left you alone in there. Do you think his father will come for us? I'd like to see him try. Where's your shotgun? I asked after pulling away and looking him up and down. Crap. I forgot all about that. I had to put it down for a few seconds back. When I was in the woods I really had to take a leak. He smiled awkwardly and scratched his stubbly neck. I must have left it there when I heard you scream. I'll just pick it up tomorrow. It's not like we need it anyways. I get scared when you do stuff like that without a weapon or anything though, I muttered. Yeah, big brother's a circus freak. Huh. Ben laughed nonchalantly and placed his hands on my shoulders again. I'm sorry. I know. I'll fish it out of the bushes first thing tomorrow. I promise. What about? I'll ask my old man to get rid of him. I'm telling you, when you get up in the morning, it'll be like none of this ever happened. Now let's get you inside, okay? I sighed and nodded, obediently staggering back inside the trailer with the broken down door and climbing into bed, still in my dirty, bloodied clothes. I didn't mind. I simply wanted to rest. I knew Ben's dad was no good in the grand scheme of things, but he'd always been good at fixing things for his son. He'd clean up the mess if Ben asked. I was shaken and beyond exhausted. Thankfully, I fell asleep the instant my head met with my pillow. When I woke up, my pajamas were clean. The streaks of blood I had expected them to leave on the sheets were nowhere to be seen. I grabbed my cell phone and took a quick look at myself through the camera. There was not a single bruise on my neck. I slid open the screen to find my brother sitting at the small table with a bottle of lemonade in one hand and an open book in the other. Upon noticing me, he looked up with a wide smile. "Morning," he said. I gave him a lazy grin in return and nodded at the fixed trailer door. "So your dad was here already?" "Yeah. You missed him yet again?" "I mean, it's not like he stayed very long, but you know." He shrugged and lowered his head, focusing on his novel once more. "Did we really leave him to die?" I asked. "We didn't. We were literal children. It was mom's call. Besides, it was sort of my father's fault in a way. He told her it was either him or me, and she chose me. He looked up at me with a little smirk on his face. You can only look after one type of circus freak at a time, I guess. I'm kind of sorry for him. Aren't you? Nope. His grin grew wider. Not one bit. Did you get your gun back? Not yet. He took a sip of his drink. I don't really want it anymore. I know I creep you out sometimes, but I think you need to let me be myself a little more. I fell silent, looking down at my feet. Come on. It's not like I'd ever hurt you. He sat aside his book and walked up to me, offering me his lemonade. I declined and he took another sip. He then spread his arms, offering a hug, but I turned away a little. He sighed, dropping his arms. Come on. He tried again. Please just get the shotgun back. Do what you want when I'm not around, but please I don't want to see that again, I murmured, fiddling with the hem of my shirt. That's all I'm asking. Okay. He sounded happy again. When he opened the door and hopped outside to stretch, there was a little skip in his step. I guess no matter how much I try not to think about it, my brother is the way he is, and someday he'll be just like his father. Then him and I will have to part ways. You can't change things like that. It's sad though, especially since he's the only family I have left now. Mom only had us 3 after all. A boy, a girl and the devil. Just not in that order. X. This was absolutely not how I thought the story was going. I hope your big brother continues to keep you safe, though. Sounds like one hell of a protector. Wow, your mother really knew how to pick them. Hope this question isn't too personal, but are you fully human or part something else like your brothers? I suppose if you have to have the devil in your life, it's good to have him in your corner. I don't understand what's happened. Was the little brother not the devil? Is it her big brother? Ah yes, the 3 genders. At least you have someone to look after you. And the devil? Sounds like the kid I babysit. Lol. The mother really reminds me of the old Olympian god Zeus, sleeping with anything that can walk and creating the most extraordinary hybrids. Damn. When I first heard you say it's not like that ever made me see him in a different light. I thought it was describing him in a negative way until you started explaining how he helps you. Then I thought it must have meant you guys are incredibly close despite only being half related then. And now, I'm back to my original guess.